This is about photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. It's 90 seconds, but wait to see what we're going to do with it. It's surprising and wild and beautiful.
Hi, this is George coming to you from Nautilus Mission Control at the University of Rhode Island's Inner Space Center. The second leg of the 2012 season brings Nautilus back to the Anaximander seamounts, where something surprising awaits deep down where the sun don't shine. Life. Now, at or near the surface of our planet, all life is powered by the sun in a process called photosynthesis. Plants capture light energy and store it in chemical bonds. Then animals eat those plants. So at the bottom of any food chain, you'll find photosynthetic organisms. But what about deep underwater where there is no light? How can life survive? The answer is chemosynthesis. Now, chemosynthesis isn't actually that different from photosynthesis, but instead of light energy powering life, chemical energy powers it. Methane and sulfides that bubble up through the Earth's crust are used by chemosynthetic bacteria. That releases energy which powers a process similar to photosynthesis. Organisms then either eat the bacteria or provide a home for them within their tissue and then use the energy that the bacteria produce. These tube worms, for example, have no mouth and no gut. They don't eat like most animals do. Instead, they depend entirely on chemosynthetic bacteria to survive. So there are two parallel food chains on this planet. One that gets its energy from the sun, and another that gets its energy from molecules that seep out of the Earth's crust. And this second food chain was discovered only 35 years ago by a team that included our very own Dr. Robert Ballard. Well, we hope you enjoyed this peek behind the science. For more, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and of course, you can always join the expedition live, right here at nautiluslive.org.
Thank you. Okay, our buddy from the world of science. Now, friends, why did we play that clip? What did we just say? What's the next step of conscious evolution? Now, stay really close because this is really important. And we've dedicated our lives to this. Barbara did, I did, we did together in our joining of genius. One Mountain is committed to this in this Da Vinci moment, in this time between worlds, as we need to actually, as our revolutionary imperative, tell the new story, right? As evolution, we are evolution telling the new story. So 3 steps. 1, the early version of conscious evolution that Barbara talked about in the book Conscious Evolution, enormously important dimensions of that book, and I recommend everyone to read it. But we've actually taken conscious evolution a huge step beyond that and actually revised our understanding of it. So step 1, the old way of talking about conscious evolution is that unconscious evolution is evolution by chance, and conscious evolution is evolution by choice. Or said differently, conscious evolution means that evolution awakens to itself through us. Everyone get that? Who recognizes that? I'm going to go to the chat box. Who recognizes that formulation of conscious evolution in the chat box? Who recognizes that? Or everyone, right? Okay. So that's a great beginning, but it's actually just a first step, right? By itself, it actually doesn't stand. It's actually incorrect. Right? And we actually have to take it the next step in order to actually evolve the source code of culture and consciousness, which is the evolution of love. And this is what Barbara and I spend the last 5 years on. So here we go. Okay. 1, the notion that evolution only becomes conscious through human beings is a narcissistic human expression. And self-evidently not true if you know anything about molecular biology, about complexity theory, right? About chaos theory, right? About the early laws of physics and mathematical structures in the first nanoseconds of the Big Bang. Just think about it this way. Evolution generated mitosis and meiosis. Evolution generated the chlorophyll molecule, which is exponentially more complex, and complex in the sense of intelligent, right? Dazzling intricacy, dazzling intelligence that all the supercomputers exponentially multiplied that we have today couldn't generate a chlorophyll molecule. So the notion that that happened by a non-intelligent, unconscious evolution is absurd. That's not an intelligent possibility. It's very clear that there's an interior intelligence and consciousness in evolution itself. So conscious evolution can't mean that evolution becomes conscious through us when we become aware of the evolutionary process. It's actually the exact opposite. It's not that conscious evolution is when evolution awakens in humanity. Conscious evolution is the opposite, when humanity awakens as the next incarnation of conscious evolution. That's the Anthropocene. And it's when human beings awaken and we realize that we don't just live in the intimate universe, but the intimate universe lives in us. That evolution is not just a force out there, that actually all of evolution, from muons to hadrons to leptons, protons, neutrons, atoms, complex, right, molecules, macromolecules, cells, multicellular organisms, actually the entire history of evolution quite literally lives in us. When I actually realize I am evolution, then it's not that evolution's awakening. Evolution was always awake. Humanity is awakening to the realization that we are conscious evolution. That actually, I'm not just telling the story, we are the story of the universe itself. And let's say it this way. Reality is not simply a fact. Reality is a story. Reality is not an ordinary story. Reality is a love story. Reality is not an ordinary love story. Reality is an evolutionary love story, an outrageous love story. And that outrageous love story, that evolutionary love story, has vectors, it has plot lines like every story. And the plot lines of the evolutionary story are towards ever greater creativity, ever greater care and love, ever greater uniqueness, right? Ever greater complexity. Evolution moves towards more complexity, towards more consciousness, towards more love, towards more uniqueness, towards more creativity. Evolution is the movement towards ever greater mutuality, recognition, union, and embrace. Evolution is the evolution of intimacy itself. Reality is a love story, right? We live in an amorous cosmos, but the amorous cosmos lives in us. We live in a cosmo-erotic universe, but as Barbara and I love to say to each other in every phone call, the cosmo-erotic universe lives in us. We awaken from Homo sapien, separate self, mechanistic, not part of the whole, to the realization that the whole lives in us, that I am evolution, that I'm not merely Homo sapien, I'm Homo amor. And Homo amor is the cosmo-erotic universe in person. So let me say one more sentence, and then we're gonna take it home and towards conclusion. And it's really beautiful. We just saw this clip. What's this clip about? What's this clip about? So it's about photosynthesis. Now, how many people caught the clip, understood the clip? Just a yes in the chat box. Who understood the clip kind of generally, got a kind of general sense of what this is saying? So it talks about photosynthesis, right? And it says that and this is how science talks. Science hides what's really happening. Science is wildly important. I read science all the time. Science is critical to the telling of the news story, both interior science and exterior science. But science often holds what's right. It hides what's really happening. Okay, Krista Giuseppe, you said not really. So this is for you. Photosynthesis is the basic process, right, that supports life in most of the planet. And what's photosynthesis? Said very simply. This is what the clip said in the classical words of science, right? The plant takes the energy of the sun and stores the energy of the sun in chemical bonds. Everyone get that? That's what our science person said. But what is that hiding? What does it mean when we say, stay close, that the plant takes the energy of the sun and stores that energy in chemical bonds? So what are chemical bonds? That seems like a scientific word. What are chemical bonds? What is that? So imagine carbon. So carbon, if you ever look at a picture of carbon, and if we had a moment, I'd put it on the screen, but afterwards, everyone take a look at the structure of a carbon molecule. Right, so a carbon molecule, for example, is a bunch of hydrogen atoms that are madly in love with each other and with the carbon atom. And these four hydrogen atoms, right, they're allured to a particular hydrogen atom. They come together through this allurement, through this love, through this eros, and they form a new whole that's called a carbon molecule. So a carbon molecule is made up of particles, elements, atoms in love with each other. And that love, right, brings the separate parts together in a larger whole. Now look at what our scientist said. He said the energy of the sun is stored in chemical bonds. The energy of life from the sun is stored in chemical bonds. What does that mean? It means that energy is stored in love. Chemical bonds are a science word, and they're a beautiful word, and they're descriptive and helpful. What chemical bonds means is that there's a fundamental allurement that creates carbon, hydrogen, etc. It's held together by invisible lines of connection, which are invisible bonds of love. So the energy of life from the sun is stored in love. Wow. Wow. Did everyone catch that? It's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Now go deeper. Go deeper, okay? Right? It's not just attraction, it's allurement. It's the allurement, right, that holds a molecule together. So then our scientist asks very beautifully, says, well, is that all there is? No. We've actually discovered in the last 35 years that there's dimensions of planet Earth that are beneath the photosynthesis line, which means they're in complete darkness, like outer space. But it's not outer space, it's the very depth of the ocean itself, which is beneath the photosynthesis line, meaning there's no sunlight. So what would we expect? We would expect that if the sun was a kind of just purely physical process, there's no sunlight, there's no life. But actually, the bottom of the ocean is teeming, right, beneath the photosynthesis line with life of such dazzling beauty, of such gorgeousness, of such color, of such depth that it's virtually unimaginable. So where does that life come from? So my friends, that life comes not from photosynthesis, but what we've only called in the last couple of decades, chemosynthesis. And what's chemosynthesis? So stay close to me. I'm going to read it to you. But again, you'll see how science so beautifully, but hides what's actually happening. Right? Chemosynthesis is the synthesis of organic compounds by bacteria. So bacteria, living organisms, synthesize organic compounds. But how do they do that? Organic compounds, right? Compounds that are organic, right? Organic chemistry, right? Carbon, etc. But how do they do that? They use the energy derived from reactions involving inorganic chemicals, methane, sulfate. So in other words, at the bottom of the ocean, you have inorganic chemicals, which are called by science dead or inert. But actually, those inorganic chemicals are actually themselves filled with eros. They're filled with allurement, which is why Whitehead said that actually all of reality has interiors and exteriors. There's no such thing as dead, inert matter. That's not true. It's actually life or sentience all the way up and all the way down. And the energy released from inorganic compounds beneath the photosynthesis line, at the bottom of the ocean in deep darkness where there's no sunlight, the energy released from the love reactions, from the eros, from the allurement in inorganic compounds, generates life, right? Generates the energy to synthesize organic compounds into bacteria, which creates, right, teeming, dazzling, beautiful, intelligent life in the deepest darkness. Right? You begin to understand. Christina, Dr. Kincaid, sent me this clip this morning. I just looked and I said, wow, wherever you look, you realize that the universe is a love story. Reality is not just a fact. This is the next step of conscious evolution. It's the awakening to the truth that reality is a love story, and that my love story, my personal love story, my unique love story, the loves of my life, my deepest heart's desires are chapter and verse in the universal love story. And conscious evolution means that I know reality needs my service. Reality needs the energy of my love.